it's recommended that you set up the property ownership before you start adding any tenants or their rents. I'm going to navigate to the property ownership here and collapse the sidebar and add the property ownership. We're going to choose managed, which currently is the only type that creates settlement and disbursements items. When you choose managed, you can set a fee. If you do set 0, then in fact, no fees will be generated. I'm going to go for a simple 10%. Is VAT included in the agency fee? If you choose not VAT registered, then a straight 10% will be added as a management fee. But if you say, for example, that VAT is included in the agency fee, so you say yes, it means that you will be charging the customers something like 8.2% commission plus VAT to make it around 10%. So generally you'd be choosing either no, to say it's not included, in which case it's 10% plus VAT, or to say not VAT registered, in which case it means VAT is not applicable. We're going to go with 10% plus VAT. The management fee is charged when the payment is received, so when the rent has been paid, and the date that this is paid out to your organization could either be the date that the money is received, which does mean that if a tenant pays 12 months in advance, you earn all of your commission up front. Or you could say that the commission is earned on the date that the rent was due, or if the rent is paid late on that day. It's quite typical for agents to take their commission up front if the rent is paid up front, so I'm going to choose that option. I'm going to set up a new landlord. Shall we do Susan Misserfit? Misserit's good. We'll just create a fake little email address here for the sake of this demo. "25 Hyde Park Villas," very posh. She lives in flat number 2. Perfect. Wonderful landlady. You can attach owner files and do extra bits, and we're going to leave it as the default that settlements happen combined, so all the properties get lumped together in the settlements. Although you can change this when you create the settlements. And we have a new option here that the settlement is sent by email to the property owner when you publish the settlement. Now, since this is a fake email address, I'm not going to enable that, nor will I enable sharing maintenance issues with this property owner. And that's it. We go ahead and we add that property owner. And I suppose I need to choose here that it's a new landlord. Great. So now that the property ownership has been set up, we are ready to add the first rents. And I can show you here, if we go to property owners on the main panel, which is this icon over here, we now have Susan Misserit, and she's there, and we can click the view button to see that she has one property that is managed at 10%. She's not been invited to join COHO. We can obviously invite her if we wish. Thank you. Now that we have the property ownership set up, we are going to go and add our tenant into the property. We'll skip the onboarding and add them directly, which is what you would use if you're bringing on old historic data. So they moved in at the beginning of this year, which is now 3 months ago. We're going to set the unit as unavailable, the rent's 2,000, the deposit money 1 month. The tenant arranges the bills, all very good. And she's going to be renting to Philip Solomon. And we're just going to leave everything else out, as it's optional, and not create any workflow. We now have Philip's tenancy here, and it's time for us to get to the rent collection panel and set up the rent collection. First thing we're going to do is create the rent schedule. Rent is due on the 1st of the month, etc. Happy with all of these. We'll generate it from the start of the tenancy. We'll go ahead and create that rent schedule. And here we have it, the 3 months overdue as expected. I'm also going to add a deposit liability on the account. So they have paid a deposit of £2,000 that we have paid over to CDS. Okay, so we've got the deposit, all those items, and we're now ready to investigate creating our first settlements. Here we are in Philip Songerman's account. He's a tenant of Suzanne, is in the property, the Willows. Looking at his rent book, he's not had any payments yet, but he's finally paid, and we are able to go and add that payment. We will add £8,000 to cover all of the rent up to March so that he's in date. We say that this has been paid by bank transfer. You can optionally choose that it's been paid directly to the property owner, which could be the scenario in some instances. And let's say this was paid on the 1st of January. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now the rent book's all up to date. It looks exactly as I would expect it to. They paid on the 1st of January the full money, the keys were released, the deposits covered, all the amounts are covered. Because we've already set up the property ownership, if we open up any of these rent due charges and we scroll to the financial items box here, we should be able to see the rent that will be disbursed to the property owner. We can see there the property owner will receive the £2,000 rent. And this item is marked as paid, which means we're ready to pay it out. And we can also see that the management fee has been generated as 200 plus VAT, so that's 10% plus VAT. And we can see the property owner is going to pay to the organization 200 plus VAT. So that's perfect. We're ready to create our first settlement. Previously, we set up Suzanne's property. We set her up as a property owner with a 10% plus VAT commission. We then added a tenant into her property, and we're now going to look at what it looks like when we create a disbursement or a settlement. You need to navigate to the Finances panel, which is this icon over here. If you expand out the navigation, you can see it here, Finances, and then go into the Settlements. For me, we're going to choose to configure Suzanne. We will configure that settlement start on the 1st of January, which is when that tenancy has been added. If we configure this to start on the 1st of April, which is 4 months later, we wouldn't have anything to settle because all those other charges are before. Since Suzanne doesn't have any settlements, we open her up and we see here there were no settlements. Settlements start from the 1st of January and we will create our first settlement. Typically, you don't need to change any of the configuration settings here, except perhaps for the include payments in advance. So a payment in advance would be where a tenant's paid 6 months of rent in advance, and you want to disperse that money, the rent money, to the property owner in advance. And that's a commercial decision for your organization to make. There could be some property owners who prefer to hold on to that money rather than the organization. But keep in mind that if the tenancy ends early, you need to get the money back to the tenant, and that can always be complex. Once we hit preview here, we can see exactly what we expect. We've got the months January, February, and March, their management fees. The months January, February, and March, the rent payments. There is no deposit here because the deposit does not get disbursed to the property owner. The deposit is something that either your agency would hold on to in its client money account, or it is something that you would pay over to a deposit protection scheme. Before I create this settlement, I realize, actually, we're supposed to charge an onboarding tenancy fee. And that's a little ad hoc charge. So I will open up the navigation on the left here. I go to Global Options or Quick Options, click the plus button on the financial item. We go and find that property. Who provided the service? We say it's us, it's our team, since it's an onboarding fee for us as the company. It's tenancy related, and we can choose here referencing. There are quite a few other categories, and you can make as many as you want. We could also just straight up choose a management fee and choose tenant find fee, which is perhaps what we'll do. and the property owner will pay this management fee. It's an income to the organization. Yeah, that's correct. And we will go ahead and choose the optional tenancy, which is Philip Sommerman in that property. Just nice to tidy it up and link it. Standard onboarding fee for a new tenancy. Go ahead and continue. And we usually charge £150 plus VAT. This is an owner expense. We hit preview here. We're going to see exactly what gets created. We can see that the organization will earn £125 plus VAT, and the property owner will pay £125 plus VAT. Yes, because the total is £150. And we can see the other items it's linked to. The supplier is your organization, and we go ahead and create that financial item. Great. Now, if we click here, refresh, we have that tenant find fees been pulled in. We can see it pre-highlights the items that fall within the date range that we've picked. Of course, we could just tick this button to toggle selecting all of them, or alternatively, you could change the date range. So in this case, we've changed it to be the whole quarter, and now they're all considered current items. And this is the settlement for apartment 1 of the Willows. So let's change the settlement name, the Willows, to end of March 2025. And the payment reference, which will be reflected on the bank statement when you make a payment to the property owner, is this over here. I believe that we've got some details about the property, the postcode. Since there's only one property, it's used the postcode and the date that the settlement's been created. So again, we can modify this if we want. Willows, March. Any notes that you want to create for yourself or note to the owner, the property owner? Please review, note the tenant find fee as standard for onboardings. Great. Settlements are always created as drafts, giving you the opportunity to review them before moving ahead. So previously we created this draft settlement for Suzanne, covering the 3 months of rent. We can get an exact view of what Suzanne will see once we publish this, and also what our organization is earning from the settlement. See here the rent charges, the management fee, and the tenant find fee. We can generate the report even though we have not yet approved or published this settlement, which could be interesting in a case where we want to send out the draft settlement for a client to review before we go and publish it. Your company logo would be on the right-hand side here. We've got Suzanne's details here on the left. The rent income total, the expenditures, the totals, and finally the total amount. For a single property, this final line is not that helpful, but when you have a large portfolio, that would say 7 properties and a total of £23,000. And here is that little note we created. Please review, note the tenant find fee as standard for onboardings. We can also send that report manually by email to Suzanne, which will send to the email address she's configured. We have the note here. We're able to edit this, change the note, change the payment reference, change a few bits, or we're able to delete the draft settlement. Now, if you delete a draft settlement or any settlement, an approved or published one, those financial items will be released back to the system for you to allocate in a new settlement. So if you do make a mistake, you can go ahead and delete the settlement. It's usually more straightforward to do that if you've not yet paid the money out to the property owner. We're quite happy with the settlement. We're going to click ahead and approve it, which does not send an email to the property owner. The property owner will receive their email when we publish it. So right now the settlement's been approved, it's on our system, it's being tracked as this needs to be paid. You can go into your banking app and pay this. Once you've paid this, you can click here, set paid. So let's go ahead, we paid Suzanne, we tick that one set as paid. And then as for the income that your organization has earned, you could either pay the 870 now, or you could leave it unpaid and perhaps later in bulk pay a bunch of your commissions and settlements out to yourself. So you would be transferring £870 from your client money account here to your company's bank account. So let's imagine that we've gone ahead and done that, so we will set that as paid. And this is what we expect a settlement to look like. Now that we've paid it, we're happy for Suzanne to know about the settlement, and this is where you could move it from approved to published. So the only difference between approved and published is that when it's published, the client has access to view it. So now that it's published, Suzanne's able to view this on her login. She will get that email notification if that was configured, and everything is good. We are here on Suzanne's account, and if we wanted to delete the draft that we just created, we can click this delete button. That will release the items back and allow us to pull them in again. Now, why would we want to delete this? Well, we actually missed charging her for the British Gas policy. You see, on this property, Suzanne's asked us to take out a British Gas home care package that covers the boiler and the electrics. So we're going to go into finances, repeating financial items, which one day this might move to sit under recurring items in the navigation. And open that up. We're going to add a new repeating item, find the property. It's someone else doing the work. Personally, I would put this under maintenance, repair, as it's kind of what it does. It reduces your repair costs. And we can put the British Gas home in 400. It's an expense. Very happy with that. British Gas were charging a total of £45, and that's inclusive of VAT. We want to create this from when the tenancy began. That's when we took out the policy. And I would need to choose British Gas as a supplier. And we get some onward invoicing details. So the onward invoicing is, what do you want to charge the property owner? And this is really interesting. You can either decide to not charge anything and still show it on the settlement. So that's good for creating goodwill. To only charge the cost. So in this case, we go, okay, we're only going to charge the cost, and we'll pay it to the supplier from our client money account. Or we'll do a markup cost, which is, although we're paying British Gas £45, we'll be charging the client £60, inclusive of VAT, so 50 plus VAT. Or we could do cost plus fee. Now, both cost only and cost plus fee asks you the question, where are you paying the supplier from? And there's two options. You're either paying the supplier from your working capital account, so one of your organization's accounts from your organization's money, or you're paying the supplier from the client money account, which means you're paying them on behalf of Suzanne, using Suzanne's money. Because we're doing a markup, I'm actually going to choose markup cost. And with a markup cost, you don't get to choose client money or working capital because it's always working capital. That's the whole thing behind a markup. We are actually invoicing the property owner £60, and then after we receive the money and we have the money in our bank account, we then pay British Gas the £45. And a marked up cost is perfectly good when the input-output VAT matches. So when the VAT that your supplier is charging and the VAT that you're charging is the same. If the supplier was a small tradesman, so each had a different supplier, and they were a small tradesman and VAT was not applicable, it could be better to go the cost plus fee route. We set up the repeating from monthly, and we can go ahead and click preview to see the preview of the charges that will be created. The first one that will be created is a payment from our company's account, paying the supplier. Now you can see here this is an expense. It's not a client expense. It's an expense to our organization. Then the organisation will have an income. The organisation will earn £60 and the property owner will pay £60. So we're going to go ahead and save that. We now have our new repair up here, and it's entirely possible to create custom financial categories. I haven't demonstrated it here. Once we open this up, we can see that it's not been run yet, and so we won't have it available in our settlements. If we go and create a settlement for Suzanne, there's nothing, no items available for settlement. So what we need to do is open up this item and click the execute next run. You see that it's going to create the item for the 1st of January. And now it says the next item will be created for February, so we're going to execute that as well. And the next item for March. So we'll run it 3 times to get it to catch up. So the next item is in April, and we'll leave that as it is. That will happen automatically. And now, if we do go and review that, we've got these 3 repair items, which are the British Gas policy charges. And so this repeating item will just keep creating itself month in, month out until you stop the item by clicking stop here or editing the item and setting an end date. Repeating items are very similar to XERO's repeating invoices. When working with financial items, there's a lot of data. You may want to investigate what's happened, try to find an item, and so I'm going to show you how to do that. You want to navigate to the Finances panel for me, as you can see here in the left-hand navigation, and open up the table Financial Items. This table is a place for you to get at the raw data underneath. For example, if we chose the supplier British Gas, starting from the 1st of January all the way to today, we can go and find those 3 repair items that we created in the previous example. Opening any of them up, the payment to British Gas is the main item, and then the sub-items are the secondary effects that are linked. And here you have the option to delete this set, both the sub-item and the main item. And when we expand these, we can see that they are settlable, and you can pull them into a settlement statement and pay them out. Now, because we chose British Gas, it showed that view. If we chose instead Suzanne, we'll find everything linked to her policy. And here we've got both the £50 that we charged her, plus VAT, and the £37.50 that we paid out. And that's why you see this figure, £12.50. It's the income to your organization. It's the balance. And those incomes are all added up and shown here on the right-hand side as income, £762.50. That's the total income your organization has earned over this 3-month period from Suzanne. You can see the tenant deposit is marked in this color because it's a tenant funds. It doesn't get owned by anyone. It's sort of kept on account. And if we enable the client money, we can also see the green line items, which is what the client has earned. So we've got here the client money of 600, the tenant funds, and your income. Lots of filters here that you can use. You can even filter on a per specific tenancy, so that's also useful. And in this case, we don't see the repair items because they're linked to the property, the British Gas items. But we do see all the items for this tenancy. You can filter by 1 or more properties. If I drop Suzanne here, I'll have access to all the properties. You can filter by properties tagged with. So we have, for example, the ability to filter by all the properties that are a council contract. See their data. These properties are marked as owned, which is why this rent does not qualify as client money. It's direct money earned by your organization. And we can see that if we open up the tenancy. Okay, that's how you go and find the financial items, try to understand the data. You've got another option here to add financial items directly. Thank you. Welcome to the first video of how to set up your XERO account. I'm here on Perfectly Prepared Properties, which is an account we've already set up before, but I will take you through the process. You pop open the navigation for me and go to the Finances panel. You will find a XERO Connections and Synchronization accordion at the bottom. Click to open it, and there you will have a list of all of your XERO connections, which typically you would not have any to start with, and you would click the Add XERO Account. The settings here you can mainly leave as they are. The most important one is to determine a staging date. A staging date would be the date from which COHO is going to push data into XERO. It's not the date that it starts pushing the data, it's the date that data has to be relevant for it to qualify for being synchronized. So for example, if I set the staging date as the 1st of January, any charges or payments that fall before the 1st of January will not be pushed into XERO and synchronized. If you are creating a new XERO account and you're starting from scratch, this date is not that important and you could kind of set it to whatever you want. But if you are transferring from another provider and you already have XERO with data in XERO, you need to decide a cutoff date that you stop creating data from the other system, and then the day after would be your staging date, the date that you start creating data. You can define how long in advance to create invoices for. My personal favorite is to create them only once a payment is attached against them. This is also called kind of cash accounting. It avoids you having all these invoices in XERO that remain unpaid because the tenant hasn't paid them yet. These items open up to be configured, and you are able to synchronize supplier payments, which would create bills to pay in XERO, and you're also able to synchronize the settlement statements, which create bills to pay and an invoice receivable for the money earned. And again, both of these only need a staging date. I'm not going to create an integration here since I already have one. Once you've got that integration created, there is a button that appears on the right-hand side here that says Connect. You'll click that button, and that button will take you through to XERO to link the account. I'm here on the XERO connection for Perfectly Prepared Properties. I've clicked the View button. It opens a new screen. This is the landing page. This table would usually be empty if it's your first time. And the first thing that you need to do after you connect your account would be to pull the account categories and contacts. Before I do that, I want to show the journey of when you connect an account by clicking the Reconnect button. That will take me to XERO to reconnect the account. This is what you will see. COHO wants to access the extent of the permissions we want. You click the Allow Access button, and this sends you back to XERO, and the connection has been established. Sorry, back to COHO, and the connection will be established. Once you've done that, I want you to click this blue button, which is very important. What that will do is it will pull in all of your chart of accounts, which are these buckets in accountancy where money gets assigned. It will pull in your tracking categories, which are ways to tag data in relation to specific properties. And I'm actually going to add Suzanne here. And this was the Willow apartment. So now we have Suzanne here. Save. And we've got Suzanne there. And under type, I'm going to leave these as they are, as Suzanne's property is a single let. On the contacts, if you already have existing contacts, you could open up your contacts to look at them, as we will need to map these. In our case, Suzanne is a new customer, so there is no existing contact. So I'll click that button to pull the data, and notice here that we've pulled 2 new tracking categories, and we've pulled all the existing options Two contacts have been updated. Now that that data has been pulled into COHO, we're ready to work down the navigation here, where we've got chart of accounts, tax rates, tracking categories, contacts. This is the XERO mappings. Before you use your XERO, you need to map these. Of course, you're welcome to do a quick test run. And we can see there that it's worked, responses received without a problem. So we've connected the XERO account, we've run the test is working, we can see there it's completed with no errors. And before we start doing synchronizations, we need to work through these mappings on the left-hand side, starting with chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is essentially mapping financial categories to the chart of accounts you use in XERO, or mapping the money types on the rent book to the chart of accounts in XERO, or mapping the payments to either, well, it could be to chart of accounts such as assets, but it's more about mapping it directly to the bank accounts. And you can see here we've actually got the open banking connection coming into this perfectly prepared properties. This is a NatWest account, which we've mapped to the NatWest account. We've mapped cash and check payments into the petty cash. And we've just, for the sake of completeness, mapped where the payment source is unknown. We've just mapped it into the bank account. So it will look for a payment there. So the rent payments are quite straightforward. Most of these you will map to your bank account that is in XERO. We go into XERO here and we go to bank accounts. There's one bank account set up, and that's the one that we're mapping it to. As for the charges on the rent collection, on the rent book, you've got rent, and that one you will naturally map to different places. So if it's an owned property, you'll map that as income under revenue. It could be sales, or it could be rental income, it could be whichever chart of account you want to use. And the same for rent-to-rent properties, as that income is earned by your organization. However, for managed properties, you don't earn the rent, the property owner does. So what's very typical is for the managed column is to map everything to your property control account, which is a liability account. It's money that you have to pay back to people, except for the deposit and the holding deposit. These you can map to custom liability accounts, tenant deposits, or in the case of the holding deposits, tenant holding deposits. I've got all these mapped to property control, to the liability accounts. And then for my owned income, I've kind of chosen where it goes to different places. These two are required for doing rent synchronizations. The suppliers and settlements mapping is only required if you're going to map settlements, or if you're going to want supplier invoices pushed into XERO. We have a similar screen here on the right-hand side where we've got managed properties. That entire column, all of it can just be mapped to your property control account, because none of those expenses are your expenses. They're expenses reducing the amount of money held in the property control account. Then the rent-to-rent column would be for properties that you are rent-to-renting, and this would be income that's typically gone straight into your normal bank account, not into the client money account. And so you map these directly to income and expense categories. Gardening, which is an expense, goes to direct expense. Inventory setup fees, etc. The left-hand side column is special. The left-hand side column is used both for properties that you own and you've set them up as owned, or for the disbursement from the property owner on the managed property. So when you have a managed property, you earn £700 of commission as a management fee, and that will fall under this category here, management fee, and it's this mapping where that money will go. and the tenant find fee that we created for Suzanne is this mapping. So you go ahead and map these. You don't need to map all of them. You could possibly not map them until you need them, but that will create a problem when you synchronize. You will get an error if the mapping does not exist. Here we have the tax rates. It's only relevant if your organization is tax VAT rated and if you're doing settlements. So you could probably ignore this, but the mapping is really easy. What you see on the left, you need to map on the right. So exempt income becomes exempt income 0% where it's an expense, no VAT. Where it's an income, no VAT. 20% where it's an expense, 20% VAT on expenses, 20% where it's an income, 20% VAT on income, etc. And you can also add custom VAT rates if you need them. Tracking categories are optional. You may not use them. If you do need to map them. They're mapped on a property owner and then property level. So here we've previously created that mapping for Suzanne. And as well for this Willow Properties, we're going to add the mapping single let. Now, the single let sits under type, whereas Suzanne sits under property. And these are the two tracking categories that we have set up in XERO, because we've got property and type. So in fact, we're expecting that that rent invoice that gets created will be tagged both with Suzanne and with single let. And you can work through this list, including your owned properties, and double checking that you don't have any properties with missing ownership information. Contacts mapping is only necessary if you have an existing XERO account that you've linked. And for example, you already have a handy Andy supplier and you don't want a new one to be created. As you can see there with the text, if you don't map a contact, we will create the contact in XERO once there is something to reconcile against them. Another example here could be Suzanne, but we don't have a Suzanne in XERO. So in fact, when we create that first settlement, we will create an account for her. So you need to go through and map all of these, including previous tenancies. You can see that we have Philip here, which obviously we won't have an account for. And you can map multiple tenancies to the same account. So it is possible, if you don't want to track the tenants in XERO, to simply map them all to the unknown contact, but that would be quite messy. I would not recommend that. Okay, with all of our mappings done, we're going to do our first synchronization run on this new tenancy. We could run it for the entire portfolio. It's straightforward. You pick all tenancies. This tick box here means that it's only going to look at data that's changed since the last time you did a full all tenancies synchronization. Generally, you can leave that box ticked. If you're finding that some things are not synchronizing, especially historic data that you're expecting to synchronize, that could be the first thing you try, would be to untick that box. So instead, we're going to synchronize that property. And we're going to untick that box because we want the historic data, although all the data we've added is after this date. So probably it would be fine even if we leave it ticked. And we're going to go ahead and run that synchronization. So this will now run in the background. You can close the browser, you can move away. It won't stop the synchronization. And we're done. So because it's completed, we don't see any errors. We could skip looking at the log, which is this is what it looks like. We could skip that and go straight into XERO and find Philip, which we now expect to exist. Right, let's search more. Search all. Okay, we haven't found Philip. The trick could be to search with the name. I'm not sure why that didn't pull Philip up. I probably had a typo there. So this is the contact that's been created by the software. It's very detailed, including the property, the unit, the tenancy number. Now, tenancy numbers are a concept within COHO. And if we open up this tenancy, we've got the tenancy number right here. You can edit a tenancy to change the tenancy number to anything you want. So if you have an existing system, or if you're migrating from an external system, you could update that to your tenancy number system. Although I recommend you use the COHO generated tenancy numbers. We can see here on Philip's account, we've got the 4 invoices. They're all marked as paid. One of them is a deposit. Let's open these up. For the deposit invoice, it's gone to the deposit chart of account. We can see the tagging there, property Suzanne, type single let, and everything is there. There's a payment against it, opening up that payment in XERO, and this is quite important to understand. We now have a payment on XERO of £8,000 that's been assigned against these 4 invoices. But the thing is that this payment is unreconciled, which means XERO doesn't know where this payment exists on the bank account. And because it's a fake payment that I just created, we can't see it here either. There's no £8,000 to reconcile. If you ran a reconciliation report, bear in mind this is a test account, there'll be lots of broken data. But if we run the reconciliation report, we find there's a missing payment on the 1st of January for £8,000. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to manually add this payment as if it was coming through the bank feed. Just for the sake of demonstrating. So first I will download their template and I'll quickly add that 8,000 Philip was paid, great. Very easy spreadsheet. Import that file. Okay, and here we've got date, which is our transaction date. We've got amount, which is our amount field. Payee is the payee, description is the description, reference is the reference, and transaction amount, there we go. Click next. We've got a preview of what we're importing. I've dated it the 1st of Jan, so we're going to go ahead and import that. And now when we run this reconciliation, we have here on the 1st of Jan, Philip, rent Philip, and the software has proposed to match it against the payment, multiple items. Now this is extremely important. It's the most important thing I want you to think about when doing reconciliations. I only want you to click the OK button here when it's a payment with multiple items. For example, this one of Timothy Fuller just above that says it's matching the invoice is not one that I want you to click OK against. That's an example of where XERO has guessed that this invoice which is payable relates to this payment. And those guesses can be wrong. That's why these are here. And we can see here Gordon Walker and Keith Easted are not the same person because this is a guess. But when it says payment with a code on multiple items, that means that it's matching against this payment of £8,000. And that's how we know it's safe to click the OK button. And that's the process. That's the entire process for reconciling one tenant. Usually you would do this process disconnected. So you would keep your rent book up to date in COHO with the banking feed, get the money coming in. Then once a week or once a month, you would synchronize to XERO. And then the same once a week or once a month, you would reconcile these payments. And we also have the 1st of April payment, which is invoice, which is unpaid. And that's being created because if we open up our configuration here, we've said create the invoice 15 days ahead, and today is within 15 days of that date. All right, well, now that we've done Philip, we want to synchronize these charges from British Gas so that we have them in the software. We're going to go ahead and synchronize the British Gas supplier and see that within XERO. That's all done now with no errors. Great. Go and look at British Gas. Search is so terrible. No idea why Xero search does not pull those up. So here we have those 3 repeating bills. And we can see we're paying the repair and maintenance category. We've got the tags again, which is very good. I didn't attach any documents, but if you did have a document attached to the financial item, it would be uploaded here. So adding your supplier invoices onto COHO is a great idea, as that will then make its way into Xero. You see this is being paid from the working capital, no problem. And this is awaiting payment. This bill hasn't been paid. To now stimulate the process of what you would do to pay these, you have 2 options. You'd pay with bank transfers manually on your phone. Just go boom, 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 make the bank transfers. The other option could be that you use Xero's built-in make a payment capability. And you choose the bank account and you choose a payment method, including you can create a payment file, or you can mark them as paid, or there's a software platform called Cresco that you could use to make these payments. That will be demonstrated more in a different video. To continue this, I'm going to assume that you've paid them with a manual bank transfer, or actually in this case, because they're home care policies, they've actually just gone out of your bank account from a direct debit charge. So you have on your bank account, you'll have these line items that are expenses paying this charge, which I will now import them. And we can see here that didn't work because maybe I didn't save the file. We'll try that again. Yes, there we go. That's what I'm after. 45, 45, 45, all expenses. We're going to complete that import. And now we have them here. 45, 45, and another 45. Now, when we go here into Xero, and we look at the data here, we see it does retrieve the payment status of the bills from Xero. It's quite useful. We're going to look at British Gas as a supplier. Got these 3 items, and they're all overdue expenses, ready to be paid. Reconciling these here in Xero and running that synchronization again for British Gas, we'll now expect to pull those payment statuses back into COHO. We open the status there, we can see that we've updated the payment status to paid. And rerunning this table, these items are now paid. Look at that, paid. And that is how you get the invoices for a supplier into Xero. Here we are with perfectly prepared properties, and we're going to synchronize Suzanne, our new property owner. Usually you would just synchronize all settlements related to this Xero connection. For the sake of this demonstration, we're going to go and pick Suzanne, and we're going to go and pick that specific settlement, although she only has one in any case, so we could probably have chosen a specific property owner. And we go ahead and we run that synchronization. And we'll now expect that under the contacts, we will get a new contact for Suzanne. Now here we have her. We also have a contact for the organization, for our organization, which I'll come to in a second. So let's start with Suzanne's contact. So what this Synchronization has created, as we can see here in the output, these 3 separate bills to pay. And they relate to the 3 separate money movements over the 2 bank accounts. So you have a client money bank account, which will have a money out for this payment to Suzanne, which is the settlement payment. We can see it's a bill to pay. It's in our bills to pay, so that would be under business bills to pay. It's got the attachment, which is the settlement statement. It's right there, making it straightforward for your accountant to review. We've got a line item here, pay Suzanne from the client money for a settlement. This one, the settlement name, the Willows in March, dated this amount. It's a payment of 5,130 quid. Again, our tags are there. Then there is a second one that would be created, which is the income for the organizations. Pay yourself, so that's perfectly prepared properties, on behalf of Suzanne by transferring client money to your bank account for the settlement, the Willows, etc., etc. And we've got the settlement number here in the reference. And again, we've got the tag, Suzanne and single let. So the sum of these two, 870 plus 5130, is exactly equal to the total of that settlement. And that tallies up with the client money that we're only paying out exactly what is due to be paid out. And in fact, if you look at if you open up Suzanne's item, that's the total rent there that's been received is 6,000. And from that 6,000, we've deducted these items, hence Suzanne gets 5,130, perfectly prepared properties gets 870. The sum of the two is the 6,000 of rent that's been received, and the client money is perfectly in balance. So these are the 2 bills to pay that get created, and they are to model the money movement from the client money account going out. There is a third item that gets created, which is the invoice chargeable to Suzanne. And this models the money when it moves into your company's working capital. When you receive that payment from the client money account, there will be a money in, and this is what you would reconcile against that money in. And we can see here, we've got the exact breakdown by chart of accounts. So tenancy setup fees, the management fees, the management fees. If we go here to our chart of accounts and we do settlements and we search for tenancy setup fees, we'll see it's because we mapped the tenant find fee to the tenancy setup fees. And hence, we have it here, tenancy setup fees. And that's how you push your settlement into the system. If you wanted to remove a settlement from the system, you have 2 options. If you delete the settlement, our COHO system will go and remove that settlement. But if you just want to temporarily remove the settlement, maybe because you want the system to create it completely from scratch, you can click this button here for me, remove settlement data from XERO, and that will go ahead and remove that settlement. Okay, I think our little boo-boo was because I didn't choose the settlement. I had only chosen the property owner. Having chosen the property owner and the specific settlement, we can see here a line item to remove the settlement. If we're curious, we can look into that to see what it's done. It's quite straightforward. It's just deleted those invoices or bills to pay. If we refresh these, they are all now void, void, void. The contact Suzanne will still exist, but she will no longer have any items under her contact. If we now create settlement again, it will come back into her contact, and so on. Okay, let's look at how we resolve an error. To resolve an error, I'm first going to create a situation that there will be an error. I'm going to go find that tenancy setup fees here, and I'm going to remove the mapping, both for the owned properties and disbursements column. So we'll expect the software to be able to create the bill to pay, but not the invoice receivable. Now we'll go back and synchronize our favorite client here, Susan, and we'll ask the system to create those settlement invoices and bills to pay. And here we go, we can see it's completed, but there's one error. So when you have any synchronization that has an error, you need to not ignore it. Ideally, investigate it and try to figure out what the problem is. Once we go in here, we can see we've created 1, 2 successfully, and the third item has failed, and it said it's aborted. And if we scroll to the right, we'll get some information why. It says here, I did not find a chart of account for the custom category tenant find fee under managed properties column. While I was trying to resolve it to create a settlement money received from Suzanne. It even gives you a recommendation. Recommend you map all financial item categories even if you think you are not using them. And that's it. That's the extent of the error. So hopefully we'll be able to resolve that specific error ourselves. We can look at another error. This one might be one that you could come across if a team member does things with their sticky fingers. We're going to go to the Suzanne contact. She has this the successful bill, no problem. We're actually going to archive her account. So now that she's archived, I'm expecting that we wouldn't be able to synchronize to her. So we'll go and fix our previous error. Tenancy setup fees. And now that we have a new error to test, let's test the new error. And we'll kick off that synchronization. We'll see that's still loading there. And there we go, we have a new error. And the error has been, here we go. Cannot apply an action against a contact that has been archived inside of the XERO system. Please unarchive the contact in XERO. And that's the relevant bit. So the software's told us exactly what's gone wrong, and we can go here and we can restore that contact. Now that we've restored that contact, we can expect the synchronization to go through successfully. All good. Let's talk about quite a common error which happens on the tenancy rents. So we'll go and we'll find Philip. And on his rent book, we will add a payment of £2,500. So he's overpaid by 500. And for whatever reason, myself and my colleague, we didn't assign the £500 remaining. We just assigned the 2,000. And now on his account, you've got a payment that has an unassigned £500. You can see it here. It says March 26 payment, part assigned. XERO does not support part assigned payments. So when we try to create that payment, the system is not going to allow us to create that payment. And we'll see that now as we rerun the synchronization and the software attempts to do an incremental synchronization. Here we go. Fail to sync payment. Scroll a bit to the left, to the right, and we'll see it's skipping. And it says here, okay, the error message is not accurate. I'll need to adjust it. But it says you need to fix the data there. So we know that the problem relates to this payment, the £2,500. We know that's the issue. So now we can go, and we know this is for Philip. It tells us there. We can simply copy the tenancy number, put it into the search bar, open up Philip's account, go to the rent collection and go, oh, okay, great. £500 unassigned, and that's because actually there was a furniture repair cost that my colleague didn't put in. So we add the furniture repair cost. So now we have that on the 1st of May. And we open up this payment and we assign the £500 to the furniture repair cost. And now everything is assigned here, everything is paid. And we are able to run that rent synchronization a second time. And we can see there are no errors.